Begin. This is a work session on February 11th, 2020. This is the Portland City Council, and here we're here today to talk about the 311 program. I want to thank Commissioner Udaley and the Office of Community and Civic Life for moving forward with this tremendous program. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Udaley. That's you.
I wasn't.
And Commissioner Fritz is on the line. I don't know if I remember to say that.
Good morning.
Let's just start with a report. I wasn't given a run of show or ample time to review my remarks, so.
Good morning. Good morning. Commissioner Udaley, I'll take it from here. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Reinhardt. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer, and I'm really proud to be here with this excellent team that's around this table. And I want to thank Council for its ongoing support of this critical initiative. City Council formally established the 311 program in the office of the CAO in November and set aside ongoing program funding.
Excuse me, I can't hear Tom very well.
Oh, Commissioner, should I be closer to the mic?
Yes, and
that
speak
better?
up a bit, please.
Okay.
The work session, it sounds like crap for all of us.
Okay, I will. I've been trying over the last few months to be further away from the microphone. I will change that habit. Sorry, Commissioner.
Not you, it's.
Today's work session is an opportunity to hear from the three citywide initiatives, 311, the Power Website Replacement Program, and the Smart City PDX effort, who are working together to improve the community's experience accessing our city government. We also hope that this session helps address questions Council raised in our previous discussions, namely about technology and how we responsibly move towards more equitable, data-informed service decisions. So let me just review quickly what our agenda is today. We will be starting with an update on the program's progress from Director Ree and Michelle Koenig-North, our program lead and 311 program manager. Next, Judy Wells and Sherry Swackhammer with MC Squared, I hope I said that correctly, MC Squared Consulting will share an updated, more nuanced assessment of the resource considerations of our next phase of services. After that, Josh Mitchell with Bureau of Technology Services, to my right, is going to demonstrate new technology capabilities that we're developing. Kevin Martin with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and Smart City PDX, who I think you know well, will discuss how council directives related to open data and data privacy will guide the program implementation. And then finally, Michelle will return to describe a pilot effort to migrate services in a more holistic manner. Now I want to turn it over to Director Ree.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners and colleagues and any community members. And Commissioner Fritz, just let me know if you need me to speak up. Today, we'd like to start with an overview of our progress since the council first funded the program 8 months ago. On slide 4, you'll see our vision. We always have to keep our vision in mind because we do love talking about technology and efficiencies and investments, but it's about people, and we want to make sure that all Portlanders, regardless of language, ability, resources, can connect easily and effectively to access city information and services. On the next slide, you'll see, again, our highlights of the program itself. The goal of the program is to provide a welcoming front door for community members where they can report an issue, make a service request, or simply just ask a question. And the program will allow people to contact any program in the city in the way that they're most comfortable and able. And that's in person, online, and also by the phone. And we should always keep those multiple access points in mind. And especially, this is important for those who have barriers due to ability, language, resources, or the digital divide. On the timeline, you will see that, well, actually, a timeline is always usually looking forward, but we're going to just take a moment and celebrate what we've actually already achieved on this timeline. As you remember, the focus for this year was to establish the foundation for the program and open a One City Customer Service Center at the Portland building. And I know that you've probably been there and interacted with our fantastic customer service reps. And if you haven't, please do, because it's really exciting to be able to walk into this refurbished, beautiful building and to see what we're trying to offer to more Portlanders. We're also working with Bureau partners to expand services and with BTS to develop the software and tools and workflows to support a comprehensive program. Staffing has also been a major milestone, and we're very proud of the team. Michelle Koenig North is the interim 301 program manager. And last week, council created 2 new represented classifications of 311 customer service representatives. So our frontline staff is now able to assist more community members in getting the information they need in person, on phone, and online. And we're also recruiting for 2 other critical program positions, a continuous improvement coordinator and a program analyst, and they'll lead the 311 improvement and reporting efforts. Now, Michelle Koenig North will talk about how we're expanding our services to make Portland a better city for everyone.
So I want to just walk through a little bit of what we're doing in terms of our service onboarding. So a primary focus of the 311 program is to reduce barriers to access for local government information and services. We have started bringing on board a variety of services that relate to the point of contact program, noise complaints, graffiti, and abandoned auto reports. Our representatives are now able to take those reports by phone or in person, and have been receiving somewhere between 100 to 300 for each of those services per month. We're also working with our partners at PBOT to assist their area parking permit program. So this is if you live in a part of city that has zoned parking, folks have to come in and purchase a parking permit for their zone. We're assisting that program, particularly when they have high volume periods. And then more generally, as Suk mentioned, we're staffing a new customer service desk at the Portland building where residents, visitors, business owners can get assistance with pretty much any city service. We're working directly with the bureaus who are in the building to be able to provide front desk services for that bureau. So as an example, with the Bureau of Human Resources, we're working with their benefits department, with payroll, with recruitment, to make sure that we can help people who come in. And we're already seeing about 2,000 contacts per month at that desk. We anticipate that will continue to grow as the building becomes fully occupied. And we're really seeing that work as an important first step in expanding this program. It helps us build relationships with city bureaus and programs and establish credibility for the program. And we didn't mention this earlier, but just a logistical point. We are happy to take comments, questions throughout the presentation. We do have anticipate time at the end for a broader discussion, but please feel free to interrupt us.
In that case, could you repeat something
Yes.
you said? I'm sorry, I just didn't quite hear it. You said there was 100 to 300 somethings per month, and I didn't hear what it was.
Sure. So for each of those first 4 bullets, the 1 point of contact, noise complaints, graffiti, and abandoned auto, our staff are already taking between 100 and 300 contacts per month. So that could be a call, an email report, or somebody walking in for each of those services.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I haven't looked ahead. This is a joint city-county effort. What is the county's involvement in this so far?
So, fantastic question. Our information and referral program, which has been operating for 25 years, was a city-county partnership. So our staff already do information and referral services for the county. And we have had a number of conversations with Multnomah County leadership and their technology department, actually facilitated by MC Squared Consulting, to help establish a path forward for how we grow this partnership. You'll see here our last bullet, we're actually working with them on a pilot to create a process where 311 can help people make an appointment for a passport application. I don't know if you've ever done that, but you walk into the county building and it's first come, first serve. You might have to wait in line for quite a while. So they're looking at creating an appointment system and potentially having 311 be the face of that appointment system to the community. That could expand into other city services as well. And then the county is also very interested in how we partner long-term in expanding the role of 311 in emergency management communications, and just as a region, how we can better support our community during emergencies and disasters.
Do you currently have a clear sense of prioritization of what services you would connect to the 311 program and in which order? Because those are all great ideas, but is there an order of things in terms of prioritization?
Yes, so we have a few different criteria that we're using as we consider which services to bring on board. We're looking both at the volume of contacts that we get. So is this a frequently requested service? And is it frequently requested by a large number of people as opposed to just a few individuals? Does it help move our equity and universal accessibility goals further? So we'll talk a bit about our ADA and language access work. And then also, does it help reduce the confusion that we put in front of the community? There are certain programs where you might need to contact one of 3 or 4 different bureaus or fill out one of 3 or 4 different forms, and we want to really bring services on board that can help reduce those barriers for our community.
I want to add one point to that. I'm sorry, Commissioner Harsty, just before we move on. I think it's important to also note that the project has been very savvy about also doing things sequentially and building confidence with our partners. Mm-hmm. And we've learned a lot from the Portland online permitting system and other large-scale initiatives we've done where we've had to sequence these in terms of keeping the momentum and ensuring the probability for success. And I think the project has done a great job on that. So yes, we have the type of prioritization that Michelle just outlined, but we're also really being thoughtful about let's push hard, but let's make sure we're successful in each phase. Commissioner Harsty, sorry to jump in.
Thank you. No, that was very helpful. I'm curious how the cost is allocated. And so are agencies that are being, departments that are being brought in, is there a negotiation that happens about what the cost is for them to participate in the program? How is that working today, and how do you see that working in the future?
So currently, the program is funded based on the November council resolution as within the overhead model, as well as some interagencies that we have with Portland building tenants and with Multnomah County. So in general, as we're looking to bring on services, we're using our staff capacity that was approved through that council resolution to provide those incremental services. Judy and Sherry are going to talk a bit about how we might migrate services and resources in the future as the program grows during their presentation.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So to talk a bit about what we're working on currently in terms of service delivery, I mentioned the ADA and language access. I want to speak in depth about that in a moment. We're also working with some great partners at Portland Parks and Recreation to be able to do recreation class registrations and picnic permits. Those are very high volume contacts that the city gets. We're working to be able to support PBOT in taking payments for a variety of their programs. And as I mentioned, working with the county on passport applications. Our ADA and language access work, currently the city has a very disparate mechanism. If you are a community member who wants to request some sort of accommodation or make a complaint about an experience you've had with the city, it requires finding an individual within a bureau who is related to the program that you're interested in and contacting them directly. We're working with partners at OHR bureaus and in the community to think about how we could centralize this program within 311 to provide a single, reliable point of contact for community members, ensure a consistent process, and make it provide an opportunity to centralize the intake, the data, and the status of those requests. This is a place where, given our focus on equity and universal access, we are reaching out and working directly with community members who speak a variety of harbor languages, safe harbor languages in the city, and who have or live with a disability to help us design that process. We want to make sure that we come out of this with a process that actually works for our community members, and that simplifies our internal administrative work that needs to happen behind the scenes to make sure these requests can be met.
I just want to give you a shout out here. Back in 2016, the auditor did a fairly sharp critique of how the city was handling some of these access issues and how we were systematizing it. I really appreciate the effort you've made to make this front and center in the design of this program.
Thank you.
I think it's a huge step in the right direction.
Thank you.
And I hope the auditor's listening.
Oh, she's always listening.
And just to clarify for people at home, OEHR is the Office of Equity and Human Rights.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll try to avoid the jargon.
Thank you.
So in terms of where we go next, Judy and Sherry will speak to this in more depth, but we're looking at a wide variety of services that could come on board that would both support community members and support our employees and programs in providing higher levels of customer service. We're also starting to scope out what might 311's role be in the city's emergency management and communication structure. This is something where we've seen information and referral work in the past, for example, with the Eagle Creek fires. They played an important role in helping the community know what was happening and what actions they should take. And it's something that we want to think about, how do we use this as a resource in the future?
Can I ask you a question on this? So this, to me, seems like a real high-value opportunity going forward. What do we know, or what kind of work are you doing to ascertain how other communities around the country are using 311 for emergency response? Do we have a process to evaluate that?
Yeah, so we've actually made connections with cities across the country and are pulling best practices and lessons learned across a wide variety of topics. This piece in particular, it runs the gamut. But oftentimes 311 programs play a very important communications role, freeing up 911 capacity for emergency response, but helping people have a single point of contact for a lot of the other questions they might have in an emergency. But it goes all the way to Miami-Dade's 311 center is a hurricane operations center. So they have invested a very high level of training and hardening, I guess, to their facility so that it can operate at a very high level in their frequent emergencies. We could also look at an opportunity for 311 to support 911 call takers more directly. Some cities use their 311 staff as kind of backup or overflow in times where 911 call takers are overloaded.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I'm curious if you have had conversations with the Regional Disaster Preparedness Committee, Council, about this idea, because I would not want us to overpromise without ensuring that they're going to pay their fair share of resources to have this additional service. Because I can see where some of my partners around that table would be very happy for us to pick up the costs to support their communication activities. So so have you actually been at that table and had that conversation?
We have not, and I will admit, Commissioner, we're very early in the scoping of this and need to have conversations with a number of partners. I think the question that you're bringing up of as 311 grows, what role does it play within the region and how does the region support that role is something that we'll need to discuss in many ways and around many tables in the future.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you haven't moved far on this, because I was a little surprised to see this in your slide, because, it's my bureaus, and I would want to have some input on what that looks like.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Hardesty, also, I just want to give you assurance in our conversation with Multnomah County is respecting the existing information and referral relationship we have and exploring, but it's being taken very deliberately and slowly. And so it's been identified as a long-term, multi-stage, multi-partner conversation, but knowing what we know about the potential use of 311 in those situations, we're holding it out there as a current
a vision.
aspiration. But our starting point is appointments for passport applications. So that's the gap, right? And so that is really our starting point for expanding 311 services with the county. But we can all look forward and see it on the horizon. But we don't do that. We don't do that unilaterally. And we're only starting to identify that with the county as an aspiration.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Judy Wells and Sherry Swackhammer with MC Squared Consulting. We asked their firm to dive a bit deeper into how we might migrate services in the future. They did extensive work with individual bureaus and programs to think about how we can move this work forward and how we might allocate or migrate resources associated with these services in the future.
Good morning. It's a pleasure and honor to be here to present the results of our customer service resource study, and it's been an honor to work with the 311 team over the past several months, facilitating both the relationship with the county and performing the study. My name is Judy Wells. I'm the president of MC Squared Consulting. We are a Pacific Northwest-based firm that specializes in process improvement, change management, and technology planning for the public sector. And so we are going to talk today about the findings of our study, and I'll be turning it over to Sherry to talk about the recommendations. And it's a brief overview. There will be much more detail in our report. So the purpose of this study was to really start collaboration or continue collaboration with the bureaus and inform the 311 approach for resource planning, and to formulate recommendations for the project going forward in implementation to increase chances for success with the program. And the benefits were that it supported the strategic planning for the 311 team, increased engagement with the bureaus, all of the bureaus were really excited to hear from us and very forthcoming with ideas and opportunities. And it informed the resource planning approach for 311. So the topics we covered, so we had a set of questions that covered really an assessment of the current state across the various customer service teams within the different bureaus we talked to. And we talked about their teams, how they're staffed, the interaction they are having with customers, whether it's walk-ins or calls or over the internet. And then we looked at challenges in providing customer service that they experienced, the technology they utilized, and the budget structure. Then we also asked their perspective on the 311 program, where they felt there were opportunities to collaborate, what they saw as the benefits, concerns, and their ideas to mitigate those concerns. The approach was two parts. We interviewed the Bureau customer service teams to understand the current state for City of Portland. And then we also talked to some other cities to help and validate our findings and come up with some more innovative recommendations for the city, because there's so many other cities that have been through this, so much to learn. So we asked some of the same questions to the other cities. And then we collaborated with the 311 team to develop the recommendations, which will be included in our report. And these are the Bureau programs we interviewed, and it ranged from larger customer service teams and bureaus such as Parks that has 16 people, to smaller programs such as in the city attorney's office, where they have an attorney and staff answering calls in a much smaller capacity, and they're on the side of their other jobs. And then just a high-level overview of the data we collected, and data was really limited, as we were cautioned when we started the study, and we found that to be true, that there is not a lot of data on the types of calls, and some bureaus don't even have data on the calls, and they just provided estimates. So we looked at what their contact methods were, whether they took calls, voicemail, walk-in, online, or email. And then we asked them to estimate the number of calls. If they couldn't provide it in a report from a system, we asked them for an estimate.
So I have a question on this.
Yes.
So where is our customer service data?
So
And the reason I'm asking this is other cities track this information. They can tell you to the month, to the week, to the day, how well they are delivering their services, and then they can use it as an accountability measure. Where's our data?
Mayor, you're going to see how we're transitioning to that when Josh takes over in a few minutes. So
Okay, I'm putting
what's
down a
being
marker.
identified here
That is a core expectation I have
absolutely.
for this system.
It's
is our
unacceptable that
ability to
we
track
don't
it.
have that, and policymakers need that.
Yes.
And should have demanded this a long time ago. But what our consultants have helped us confirm is that we don't have that in many parts
Well,
of the
I can
operation.
confirm it just based on public testimony we get in the council chambers. I mean, not a week goes by where somebody doesn't say, I reached out to this and this and this and this and this, and I got nothing in response. And there's no way to tell whether that is the case or not the case. But my
Yeah.
personal experience tells me it's true.
Well, we look forward to you telling us once you see a demo, are we on the right track with what
All
we're
right,
building
well,
for you?
I'm telling you now, this is a
Okay.
core expectation I have of the 311 system.
Sir, can I also ask, in addition to the data, I think we'll also trying to expose, we also need a culture of customer service. That is not just, it is an attitude, but there are also systems and there are also policies. And so we need data and a citywide culture of customer service that is going to meet 21st century expectations.
Director Ree, you're spot on. It is changing the culture to one of problem solving, troubleshooting, and helping solve the needs of the customers. It is also a need for a culture of accountability. And when people say they can't even estimate their customer service contacts. That gives me great concern.
Excuse me.
Oh, Commissioner Fritz has a question. I apologize, Commissioner.
That's okay. First of all, I think the Information Referral Service has that data, at least they did when I was in charge of it. But second, my other question is, did you not interview the Water Bureau's customer service people?
Did we interview the Water Bureau customer service people? was the
No,
question.
we did not. The approach that we took for the sample of bureaus was not to interview all, but only the early adopters that would be easier to start with. Do you want to talk
I'm
to that
really
one?
concerned about that because first of all, I'd like the Water Bureau to be one of the early adopters because not of course for the complicated questions, but for simply paying the bills. And second of all, we have 100 people in the customer service center there and lots of data. So I think that should help inform how the system is set up.
Absolutely, Commissioner Fritz. And we have had very similar conversations with the Water Bureau and then their customer service supervisors in the past. We've asked MC Squared Consulting to kind of reach out to those that we hadn't had those types of conversations. So we can, this is kind of building off of data and information and lessons learned that we had from that previous outreach.
Well, given that the Water Bureau is one of our biggest service centers, it seems like we should be, the system should be starting off with the information from them.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time? I couldn't quite understand.
The Water Bureau is one of our biggest customer service centers and one of the ones that gets the most contacts. So it seems that the system ought to be designed with inputs and with incorporating some of the Water Bureau's methods into how people get service.
Yes, so we are certainly learning from the Water Bureau in terms of their systems that they've put in place. We have not, at this point, prioritized the Water Bureau for coming into 311 because they have a relatively specialized customer service staff, and community members don't face a barrier to accessing Water Bureau programs. It's certainly something that we could consider further, but just as one data point, since we've opened the Portland building, we've had less than one person a week come in trying to pay their water bill. So we're really seeing that people know how to get to the Water Bureau and make sure they get those service needs met.
My point is just that they've got a lot of experience, and as you say, people know how to get to them and get their questions answered. So it would seem like that would be important to consider how they do that in setting up the 311 system.
Absolutely.
Okay, so continuing with the overview of the data. So across the 6 different bureaus and offices we spoke with, there were approximately 240,000 calls, and people were answering bureau-specific information requests or complaints, but also there was a significant amount of time spent on wayfinding, getting to the right person, wrong numbers, incorrect referrals. And then we also looked at the staffing. So across all of these customer service centers, there were 85 staff and 52 FTEs, which means the percentage of the time that those 85 staff are actually spending working on customer service because they have other duties. They're not dedicated. And then the customer service reps ranged across 10 different classifications, often represented. And then the technology used was fairly basic, the Track-It system, MS Access, and then some used specialized tools for their bureaus. So, and we mentioned the data limitations. So moving on to some of the challenges and the root causes behind them that the bureaus identified. So a common theme was calls are not always receiving a live answer. Sometimes they go to voicemail, so not 100% are answered live. And then a high bounce rate. So people tend to get transferred multiple times before they reach the right person, which is really frustrating. And then by the time they reach the right person, they are, yes, angry. And inconsistent customer service approaches and the people they talk to. Not all of the people they talk to are trained customer service professionals, and the approaches vary across the bureaus. Insufficient access for customers. Not all have the opportunity for walk-ins or translation services. And then inefficiencies due to the manual processes and inadequate technology. When it takes longer for the customer service rep, it takes longer for the customer. And then request backlogs, such as the public records backlogs and other backlogs across the bureaus. And so what are the root causes behind these challenges? So one part of it is there's a lack of dedicated staff for customer service, which impacts the consistency, and also the people that are working on the customer service, the second bullet, they're often have other jobs to fulfill the customer service requests, and they're not getting to that because they're spending all their time on the calls.
So I have a question on that. I mean, I think pretty much every city employee has some customer service in their job, especially those that face outward to the public. And so are we measuring the right thing? Because, right, I mean, because I expect all city employees, whether or not they have customer service in their title, to have a customer service approach when they're engaging with the public. So I wonder if we're setting up different expectations for, it just made me wonder about that when you went with that
so
comment.
Our focus was on the people that are actually answering the phone
Or
calls.
the
and
first kind of direct response to the public.
Yes, that are directly responding through phone or walk-in. And in our recommendations for the citywide culture of customer service, we are recommending that it is citywide across all
Thank you.
employees.
That's what I was getting at, because it's like it doesn't help if,
Yes, because even if you have a customer service rep that answers and then sends them to a subject matter expert, that they need to also think of themselves as a customer service representative for the city. Everybody is a representative.
Absolutely.
That's what we're recommending. So, and then siloed data. So since the systems are not connected across the departments, and some customers contact multiple departments, they don't have the information, complete information on the customers, which is a barrier to service. Outdated and inadequate technology, limited budgets, and then lack of standards and citywide culture of customer service, which we'll talk more about in our recommendations. So how can 311 help with these challenges and root causes? There are three primary ways: improving access, so having a single entry point for incoming online or calls or walk-in. That will really help a lot, because right now people are having to find a number and they're not getting to the right person. And now with 311, they can just call that number and people will be trained to get them to the right person. And there will be translation options for all. And then the customer experience. So there will be customer service representatives answering the calls that are trained, and they will be getting a live answer when they call 311. And then level of service. So the customer service staff out in the bureaus that are also doing the work behind the scenes to fulfill the service requests, they'll be able to spend more time doing that work, which will improve the service levels overall. And that was a number one finding we from talking to other cities, is how it improved things was overall the staff out in the bureaus could focus more on that type of work. So now I'm turning it over to Sherry to talk about where we recommend going from here.
Good morning,
Morning.
everyone. Yes, so I am
You might
going
want to
to
move that a little
talk,
closer.
okay. I'm going to talk about our recommendations. And I'm going to start with our service migration recommendations. So I think after talking to all the bureaus and their staff, we believe there's a great potential for you to move some of the calls from all the programs that we talk to, and that people are excited about that. We think you should continue a thoughtful approach to this migration and consider collecting more specific data and volumes and types of contacts, because types of contacts was one area where we really got very limited data.
Can I ask you a question? And I'm sorry to ask what may be a stupid question. Is there any question about whether we're committed to doing this? Because I think we're past that stage. We've committed.
Right.
Well, I think that just needs to be communicated to everyone.
Oh, okay.
And
You want to speak to that, Michelle, for a minute?
Well, I think that we're hitting this nice crest where we have support from leadership on migrating services. We're also seeing more and more bureau programs recognizing that this could really help them, both with their customer service experience and, as Judy mentioned, with their ability to provide those underlying core services. What we're trying to tease out as we migrate is where's that dividing line between what portion of the service comes to 311 and what portion is better suited to stay with a specialist in a bureau who needs specific training or certifications or access to certain systems in order to consider and potentially approve a customer service
Okay,
request.
so this is more of a rally the troops and get them to think about
Get them
how
on
this
board.
system could be helpful, but I'm determined not to leave here until this is done. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the decision's been made.
I hope you don't.
All righty.
No, not this one. I'll be here a long time.
So we think you should continue, again, a thoughtful approach, looking at data volumes specifically and types of contacts. You may need to set up some consistent templates for people to really collect some of this information over some period of time so you have a clear path moving forward. This data, you want to use it to inform and predict, again, the required staffing levels. I think where there's also opportunities that Michelle mentioned earlier is to improve process workflows. When you're out in the bureaus looking at how some of the customer service processes are occurring now, they may not be the most efficient. That might not be probably no one's fault. They're trying to get their other jobs done and customer service done. But I think you do have a big opportunity for improving efficiency relative to workflows. And then finally, training the 311 team on whatever you decide to move over so that they're knowledgeable, they have the right answers quickly, and that they can gain really the community's trust and the Bureau's trust immediately.
Well, I just want to make sure that the 823-4000 phone answer or customer service were in our top of the line. So I don't want anybody to think that our current professionals who have been providing information to the public are not just the top of their field. They are absolutely excellent, right? So what we're really talking about is how to improve customer service broadly so that people have one point of contact and they're not being just shifted around.
Right.
The more we have this conversation, I started feeling nervous that there may be a perception. I mean, I think the bureaus are the ones who haven't quite figured out what's the right flow. And of course, there wasn't a direct line to the person you're looking for. But I did not want to leave this conversation without saying that we've got excellent customer service people, and what we're doing is adding to that excellence.
Yes. And I think we were enthusiastic about the opportunities after talking to the staff because they all had a lot of ideas about how 311 could make the city better and to make their jobs better. And you can see here the bureaus that we talked to, and Judy's already mentioned the service teams, but they all felt like helping the community find what they're looking for faster and more efficiently could be helped via 311. Could be impacted, certainly, via 311. Some of them thought that there were service requests or reports that 311 could assist with. Others thought there were applications for things that could be applied for via 311 or payments that could be made through 311. And then the garbage and recycling group thought that through that they could use 311 from an outreach perspective if they were changing policies, things like that, that you could proactively use 311. I think there were other areas where you could proactively use them, like there were a lot of calls to PBOT, I think, around, what's going on in my neighborhood. So I think if you had a big project, you could effectively use 311 to reach out and tell people what's going to happen, and then cut down some of the calls.
Now, I'm curious, with police reports, if 911 took police reports, do you have a sense for what the staffing needs would be? I mean, are there times where that would just overwhelm the 311 system?
Do you want to speak to that, how that process is currently handled?
The police reports. So we did interview the police bureau, and there were, they did not have exact data on FTEs and the number of calls, but we did include their numbers in that, and I don't sense that it would be, if there was a proper transition and studying what would make sense to come to 311, that it would be an overwhelming to take on those calls.
And so, Commissioner, I think there's a distinction with police reports. There are certain police reports that require an immediate police response. We certainly want those to be going through 911 call takers. There are other types of police reports, certain property crimes, things like that, that you can report online right now. You're not requesting an immediate police response. You're just kind of creating a paper trail. We also have a lot of requests for copies of police reports, people who are filing insurance claims, things like that. And those elements are a high volume of requests to the police bureau. So I think we're interested in exploring opportunities for 311 call takers to kind of pull off pieces of that work that will then free up our 911 call taker capacity and our police bureau capacity for that more critical emergency response work.
I had a question and it just went, phew. It's all good, it'll come back. Yeah, it'll come back.
I think it also goes back to what we were talking about, is kind of some of the next steps are to really look at specifically what kind of types of contacts are you going to bring over, and what's the real volume, so that you can, and when I talk about volume, what's the normal volume, what are spikes, how often do those spikes happen? So just getting kind of that next level of information about each transition will be important.
And being clear with the public, kind of, right? Because I think there's some police reports that just automatically are done online now, right? Like for auto theft, for minor burglaries, right? And the public is just directed to go online and fill out a form, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Which is different than if, and so my question is, it came back, is around, this would be a public records request, would it not? And how does that change the system, right? So if you go to the police bureau and need a copy of the report so that you can file your insurance claim, that is considered a public records request. And so how would that?
So those are all the details that we would need to sort through prior to migrating these services. So is there specialized access, specialized training? Does that make sense to migrate to 311? Is the value add both to our bureaus and to our community members greater than the changes that need to be even put in place to make it happen? But yes, it is, those police reports are managed in a specialized system at the Police Bureau records system.
So now we'll talk about resource strategy recommendations. Our goal in talking about a resource strategy is to really improve service delivery, increase the capacity in bureaus, and improve efficiency. Some of the key strategies that we came up with is really an acknowledgement of there is no one-size-fits-all. Because of the complexity of each bureau and service team, you really have to look at each one, work with the bureaus to determine an appropriate option that meets both 311's objectives and the bureau's objectives and is best for the community. And then what we've already been talking about is for each one, develop a plan for transition. And that plan needs to have all the relevant information on volume, contact types, timing, legal requirements, whatever it might be, legal requirements like responding to public records requests, and have that in enough detail to be successful. And I think this is one of the lessons we learned when, or things that we heard when we talked to the other communities, is that the ones who had detailed plans, the projects went better than ones that didn't have detailed plans. And also, I think the other thing we heard was, as you're developing these transition plans, is don't overcommit. Some of them took on more than they really should have at one time, and wished they hadn't later on. So we also came up with a number of resource strategy options. So how should things be transitioned? How should 311 be staffed? And I'm sure there are some hybrids of these, but the primary three that we looked at were training 311 individuals, current individuals, recruiting new staff, and transferring. So in our findings, we thought that, training the existing 311 staff to take on new types of contacts was most appropriate when the contacts were a small portion of an FTE. So it's part of someone already has a full-time job, but they're also taking calls or doing emails or responding to voicemails. That moving that would be appropriate. And again, when they're not in a really customer service resource or customer service representative job. And when the calls or contacts are simpler or maybe wayfinding calls. I think the benefit here would be you're freeing up resources for the bureaus so that their staff can be more focused on their direct service work. And we did hear this quite often from bureau staff, that this would be helpful to them. You may, when you have contacts where a single or maybe a few FTEs are involved, their specialized skills, and those resources really need to stay in the departments to do other work, then that might be an opportune time to recruit new 311 members. Again, it frees up the bureaus to do their work. It adds some additional capacity to your 311 program. And because you're hiring some of these customer service skills, it limits some of the training that you'll have to do. And, improves your level of customer service or skill set. And then if you have larger programs with very specialized skills, and maybe the bureaus don't really need those people to do other jobs other than the customer service work that they're doing, then that might be a time to transfer a whole group into 311. And in this way, you'll be preserving existing expertise, keeping the skills and the knowledge that you have, and there'll be a much less need for training. And then our other recommendations really focused around customer service culture and standards, which we've talked a little bit about already, technology, and change management. From a customer service culture and standards perspective, I think this answers really why you don't have some of the data that you might expect to have, is that there's not really an expectation, a consistent expectation of what customer service means. There aren't standards and there aren't standard metrics. So if you implement those types of things, You will improve the consistency and overall, I think, customer experience, and you will have improved data and comparable data, because I think that's the other thing that doesn't exist right now. There might be some data in a lot of places, but it's not always comparable. It's usually not comparable, probably.
Could I just interject here for a second, please?
Please, Commissioner, go ahead.
When we're talking about service standards, I want to make sure that the Office of Equity and Human Rights is involved in those conversations. What we find in the Water Bureau is that when you have metrics like the number of calls that the call takers take per hour, or other such, how quickly they resolve problems, that maybe doesn't take into account whether they are working with somebody who is an immigrant or refugee and is not familiar with the system or speaks another language. And, part of customer service is making sure that everyone gets good customer service and not necessarily only how many calls can you answer per hour. So I just want to make sure that as we're setting up this system, that we consider factors that maybe haven't been considered standards or haven't been factored in the past.
Commissioner, thank you for that comment. We do have a slide coming up that focuses specifically on performance metrics and how we can develop systems, standards, and metrics that reflect exactly what you're speaking to, our ability to represent and serve all of our community members, and not just focus on the volume that our service centers can handle. So thank you.
Can I
Thank
just
you.
also add, introduce the terms multilingual, multicultural as well, because we do have the capacity to provide services in multiple language, and we can grow into that.
Okay. And then from a technology standpoint, we're recommending that you introduce a standard integrated technology platform that has some enhanced and expanded functionality, including data analytics, that you involve the bureaus in the planning and requirements development for implementing these systems. I think we heard that consistently. The bureaus want to have input in what kind of data you're collecting, and because they believe it can be useful to them, especially ones that might be able to mine that data to provide better service. This should improve efficiencies. It'll allow sharing data across bureaus. I think bureaus were wanted to be able to look across the city to get information and better understand what's going on from a customer perspective. It will improve customer service overall, and it should provide better data for decision making. And then finally, change management. I think taking on this big initiative. Change is hard for people, even if they're invested positively in it. We think fine-tuning your governance structure and getting the bureaus more involved will be important. Creating a dedicated change management team that can really help you and your staff manage through this will be important. Assessing the readiness for change will help you know what's important and whom needs more help than maybe others, and what kind of help that might need to be. And then developing a change management and communication plan. This will improve the alignment really across bureaus, and it will minimize the impact of the transition, because everybody will know what to expect and how they're going to be impacted.
So I'm curious about the technology. What did you find as far as how effective we could talk among bureaus using the current technology that we have? Is there a percentage of bureaus that are easy to communicate with via technology? Because I have found that we have some very antiquated technology, and it's kind of embarrassing when I talk to other people about the technology that we have. And so that's one question is, where are we starting from? Are we starting from a place that a technological investment is going to break the bank?
I don't think so.
No.
And I think later in the presentation, you'll hear from
I know
Josh.
he's next,
He's
but
next, and I think
but it's in
he'll
your
be able to-
recommendation, so I wanted to make sure, what did you learn that made you make that recommendation? Because clearly you saw something.
Well, we learned that you have a lot of variation in the technology that's used. A lot of it is very old and not supported anymore. And actually, in some areas, they don't use any technology, that they're hand checking.
Yeah, I have about 500 firefighters that don't have email because we can't afford it based on how the city charges it.
And it was also based on talking to the other cities, too. Every city we talked to had an integrated customer service system that was across all their different agencies.
And I do want to point out that the bureaus and specifically the programs that Judy and Sherry reached out to are ones that we see as there being a big potential win from migrating them over to 311, in part because many of them lack some of the technology or internal capacity to do exactly what you're talking about, Commissioner Hardesty. We do have other bureaus and programs within the city with much more comprehensive customer service systems and specialized technology that's backing that up. I would call out the Water Bureau, BDS obviously is just on the end of a major technology migration. The Revenue Bureau and their customer service center is also in the midst of that. So we do have variation that goes beyond what's represented in the study in front of you. It's still me. So speaking about technology, it's an excellent segue into the next portion here. We are working very closely with the Bureau of Technology Services to think about and develop tools that will support 311's potential to engage with our community members and support our internal city leadership and bureaus in making more informed service decisions. The technology that when we say technology, we're really talking about a few different things. We're talking about the online experience through portland.gov, the city's new website, our various web form solutions. So how can a community member actually make a request? How could a 311 representative may take a report or make a request on behalf of a community member? And then what sort of tools, commonly called service desk tools, are sitting in the background that allow us to do the work of logging that contact, researching questions in a knowledge base, intaking requests, routing them throughout the city, and then getting really well-designed data to help inform both our 311 operations and service and outreach decisions across the city. So I'm going to turn it over to Josh, who's going to do a demo of some of the tools that BTS is working on that will support our 311 program.
Hi there, I'm Josh Mitchell. I am product managing the new Portland.gov implementation through the Power project. That's Portland, Oregon website replacement. I can no longer spell the word power correctly because I've been spelling it incorrectly now for close to 2 years. So what I'm gonna do here, we do have some slides that kind of talk through the various parts of this, but I just love punishing myself by doing live demos. So we're gonna do this live. There we go. All right, so you can see my screen. We wanted to start with something that would be simple, and a good way to start with that would be a simple intake form if somebody was making a request. And I'm actually starting with the mayor's site here as a good example. Currently on his homepage, you can see there's the ability to request a meeting with the mayor. Currently, that takes you to our Track It tool. This tool is a tool that's been around, a part of the existing content management system. That content management system has been around for 19 years. So as you can imagine, some of the techniques and technology used to build it aren't necessarily the modern ones that we would want to use. But this is an example of what that Track It form looks like. It's not terribly accessible. It's not easy to use on a mobile device. So what we're recommending first off is that we do better job at web form building. And this can serve as kind of an entry point for a much higher volume of requests than even we can do through phone support. The nice thing too, if the forms are designed well and our service directory is designed well, this is basically where our 311 staff can go to fulfill the request for somebody who's just called in. They can basically go to the form and fill it out for the person as if they were them. That can definitely play into equity and being able to provide these services in multilingual sorts of way. So I'm going to start here. We're going to have somebody request the mayor to speak in an event. This is going to be the Society of Bicycling Knitters. Seems very Portland to me. All right. Please come tell our membership all about the amazing 311 and new Portland.gov. All right, there we go. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Let's see, we'll do this on Valentine's Day. Why not?
I actually don't.
I'm hoping this isn't an actual society, by the way, because they're going to be really excited and then, not actually have the mayor come speak. So we're going to collect some information from them this time. We're going to do Testy McTesterson. And y'all are probably wondering why Testy McTesterson is the name. And that's because I have a Gmail account for that person. And 503-555-1212. Oh, thank you.
I'm doing a headshot for that.
More than an hour, yeah. You're right. It's going to take a while to get through all the amazingness.
Or allowing myself to.
All right, so simple form here. By the way, this is also a mobile optimized form. It's also a form that's easy for us to translate, so if we want to provide it in different languages. I'm going to go ahead and submit this. And when it gets submitted, it's actually going to bounce back with a response on the page that basically gives the person some expectation and affirmation of what it is that they've submitted. So it's going to tell them everything that they've submitted. It's also going to give them some sense of the time it's going to take to respond to this request. Now, what I have over here is my inbox for Testy McTesterson. And assuming I spelled my email address correctly. Ah, shoot.
If it doesn't work for the tech guy, we're doomed.
No, it's all good. Human error from typing can happen in live demos,
Yes,
and I'm prepared for that. What Testy would receive is an email response that says, hey, we've created a ticket for you. And whether we call it a ticket or a case, basically what we're doing is creating a record that's going into our system. So
That sounds very criminal justice.
Yeah, let's.
if we call it a case,
No, that's not
Oh,
call it a case or
or ticket, or
Let's call it something totally different.
a request. Request.
Yes.
What's happening on the back end is what we'll actually see here is 1 minute ago, our customer service agent actually received this in their inbox of unresolved tickets. They can go in and they're going to see all the same data that was submitted by the user. They now have the ability to go back and forth with that user with public replies. They can reply and then submit the ticket as resolved or submit the request as resolved. They can do internal notes where they actually have conversations with internal people to figure out what resolution looks like. They can get it to that state. They can also provide metadata about that ticket. So basically what this system is doing is allowing for tracking of all that data that we need to do. And I've shown the example here of a web form, but
Can I ask a question before you move on?
you bet.
And so, in this particular case, so you just requested that the mayor come and speak at this event. The customer has now gotten a confirmation that the request is in. Thank you very much. We've given you a timeline. What happens in the mayor's office?
So what we would need to do is for each of these services that we bring online, we need to determine, is it a solution where the 311 team can take it all the way to resolution? Or is it a solution where the 311 team might take the request, but it's actually going to be resolved by someone in that office? And so in this case, what we would want to have is a minimum of a couple of people within that office that could help resolve the request that were brought on as agents, customer service agents in this system. And then they would use this system for the communications and tracking that goes back and forth, rather than just sending it back and forth in email, because email is not structured enough for us to collect all that data about what was actually requested and how was it requested. Was it a phone request? Was it a web form-based request? How did that come into the system?
So I know this is just an example, but are you suggesting that we would route all community members through the system to make direct requests to our offices?
Basically, we would be replacing the existing systems that you use, such as Trackit, where you got a Trackit request to come
I don't
in,
use
or
Trackit in my
or
office.
if it came in through email, we would
Right.
basically say, well, instead of just taking it as a raw email, pass it into this system. We can even set it up so that your staff would have, if they received an email and they said, oh, you know what, this email request is actually something we need to track as a request, a ticket.
Okay.
They could forward it to an email address that would automatically bring it into the system.
Interesting, okay.
I want to make the point that there are many advantages of this, but to your question, Commissioner Daly, I think one of the follow-ups that come to mind for me are each month or whatever duration that you'd want to actually review with staff. What are the requests? How long is it taking to resolve them? You have more data analytic and accountability capacity, as the mayor mentioned, than we currently have. Whereas most of us exist in sort of a fog of anecdotes or incomplete data around what's actually coming in and how is it being resolved. This is really taking us to another level. And
Can I ask a question about this, a general question? So the website replacement project that you were discussing has a sunset attached to it. What happens to all of the data and the continuity once that sunset is reached? Who is servicing and maintaining the system?
For the existing Trackit forms and sunsetting those forms?
Yes.
We are going to be looking at each of those and deciding what the disposition of the data should be at the end of migrating it to the new system, because this is part of the Power project is really Trackit replacement as well, because that's built into the old system. And so for every form that we move off of Trackit and we begin backing with one of these systems, we would basically have to look at that data and decide, do we archive it in place?
There is a resolution that is specific to this program. And then the second one, it's not necessarily specific to Power. It's more speaking to the 311 system as a whole. All of us get junk mail from companies selling CRMs or civic apps.
Slacks.
I mean, they come by the day, by the second now. Is the intent to use those, or is the intent to use more of an enterprise-wide approach? What's the current thinking?
So the difference between customer relationship management or customer service management is really minor. I think whenever you look at the big CRMs like Salesforce, they're trying to sell the idea of managing your sales pipeline. So it's very sales-driven, very sales-focused. When we look at the data that we need to collect to resolve issues, to resolve requests by the community, that fits better into customer service management tools that basically do a case-based system. We're still going to be collecting all the tickets that they've created over time. We'd be able to see this is a person that has contacted us for reporting graffiti, but they've also contacted us to make this other request. All of that basic customer service management data fulfills that need. So I think without going down the route of a multi-million-dollar CRM implementation, what the city is really doing is customer service, not sales pipelines and that sort of thing.
Do you believe that's sufficient, given the state of, I'll just say the state of the 311 industry in heavy air quotes out there, because there are other cities that have these larger enterprise-wide systems? Will we have the same capabilities?
Michelle, you want to talk to that?
Sure. So I would answer that in two ways. One, we are seeing that kind of the best practice with cities is moving towards more modular technology solutions that actually can fit, can meet the specific needs and serve the specific needs of the city, rather than migrating to a large blanket application that kind of forces you into a certain type of data collection and service delivery. That being said, what we see with cities that move to these large CRMs is that they tend to be integrating a wide variety of systems, asset management systems, the customer relationship management that Josh spoke to, and trying to collapse all of that. Given our form of government, given the needs of our bureaus, what we've done is looked for a solution that can actually work with all of our business applications, the Maximo that PBOT uses, Cayenta that the Water Bureau uses, rather than trying to replace all of those systems. So how do we best meet the needs that we have, rather than solving for problems that we don't have, I suppose.
And I'm not opposed, and philosophically, the way you've described it sounds good. I guess as the project unfolds in the coming years, I'd like to know what the trade-offs are. And I want to make sure that if we are choosing to create a modular system, that we're not unintentionally creating internal barriers to data sharing. That's really concerning to me. Aside from the usual concerns people have about app-based application, well, they are application, being discontinued or no longer serviced, or. And then we have a core part of our customer service infrastructure dependent upon an app which may or may not be serviced.
So the larger point that you're making, Mayor, about the utility of this system, the usefulness of what Josh is describing is totally dependent on our adoption of it. If we have an enterprise push to move all of our forms to this new platform, to move the service request data and resolution data to this type of platform, then we get the benefit of being able to look at that data across the city, do comparisons, understand when community members are contacting us for different purposes. But if we silo those communications into different systems, we won't be able to achieve that goal.
And it sounds like you're saying that's not what you're going to do, so good.
I have grave concerns about technology at the city. Our website, our old website, was so terrible I tried not to ever look at it or ever send people to it. I inherited a bureau processing thousands of permits a year, working on outdated software that was unsupported, and if it had failed, we would have had to go back to a paper system. I'm incredibly frustrated on a near daily basis by a variety of technology issues in the city. So I want, 311 has been around for almost 25 years. I don't want the 311 system that Chicago had in 1999. I want an amazing 311 system for Portland that's reflective of current capacity with technology and best practices that can grow with us and doesn't end up like our stagnant, outdated website. So when you say modular, that means we can add capacity, abilities. We could add a CRM to Zendesk if we wanted to. Is that correct?
It could very easily be integrated. The pilot that we're looking at is with Zendesk because of the cost to benefit ratio for us implementing a call center-based app. But we are looking at other products as well that can integrate in with things like asset management and some other things. All of these tools that we're looking at are software as a service, which means that they're built cloud first. They were built to scale. They're used by large organizations to provide customer service. If I look at something like Zendesk, I can even point to across the river to TriMet and say, TriMet uses Zendesk for all of their customer support requests that come in, as a perfect example. New South Wales, the county that holds Sydney, Australia, or the province that holds Sydney, Australia, they use Zendesk for this type of request, and numerous large-scale businesses do. Again, we're using this particular product for the pilot because it solves all the needs for the pilot, but we are keeping our options open for what that actual technology is. No matter what it is going to be something that is integratable.
And so
I
I want
have
to.
I'm not quite
Oh,
done.
I'm sorry.
So you mentioned mobile optimization. I want a mobile app. So where are we at with that?
That is possible with this system as well. It has a fully functioning API so that you can make submissions via a mobile app, and we could look at what that would take to roll out. I tend to, whenever I'm making recommendations to customers, I tend to push towards being a mobile-first web approach because it is less cost while still providing that capability. It's also less maintenance, but yeah, it definitely, you have to consider mobile in the way that people are going to interact with it. We know that 50% of our web traffic is mobile. So we know that mobile, it really needs to be mobile first, not mobile second.
Okay. Every bureau will have some kind of customized analytics dashboard. Like this information will
Could
be.
you forward up 2 slides. So what the tool has is as you break down the groups that are programmed into it, and so groups could be a entire bureau, it could be a sub-office or a program that is tracking a particular set of services. And then what we would have are basically analytics dashboards that would give us a sense of call volume, time to resolution. We can set up things like SLAs that alert a manager if something has not been responded to for X amount of time. A lot of that can be built into the tool to basically facilitate better customer service workflow.
So then, could we look at that data citywide to help paint a very comprehensive picture of where requests are coming from, what type of requests, who's making the requests? It's not going to be siloed by bureau, participating bureau.
Yes, and so I think that's one of the big values of moving towards this sort of approach and setting up the customer service culture and standards that Judy and Sherry spoke about. 211 Info, which is a statewide program that helps people access community and health services, actually is a very robust data collection tool, and they're able to display, how many people have contacted us about housing services, and then drill down into, was it rent assistance? Was it trying to apply for a certain type of housing program? And then within the service levels that Josh mentioned can actually look at, were we able to resolve the majority of those, or do we have a large number outstanding? And then that can point to opportunities to improve
So the answer is
services as
yes.
well. Yes, I'm sorry.
I have a couple other questions, because I'm afraid we're going to run out of time, and I have a lot more to say about this. Is there capacity to integrate with social media? For instance, when I send out a PBOT maintenance crew, they've got a ticket through Zendesk or whatever we're calling it. I want them to take a photo of the pothole they just filled and tweet it out. Is that?
Well, we definitely work with the bureaus on the communications post-resolution, but the tool definitely supports what's called omni-channel
Great.
capabilities, which is it can take a ticket in from email, it can take a ticket in from a web form, it can take a ticket in from chat, from text, and technically you can integrate it with social media. I mean, we could have the equivalent of, Portland Cares or something like that, where, that was, and that's gone now because we just mentioned it, so somebody bought it. But we can have that kind of channel that would be available.
And then last question, I want us to vastly improve our customer service. I want to alleviate the burden on 911, but I see this as potentially an amazing tool for civic engagement. Are there I guess, options we can add on that would create an online platform for our community members to engage with each other. Say they go on, they have a burning issue, they have a particular problem in their neighborhood, well, they may be able to connect with other people in the neighborhood or across the city who are facing similar challenges. That's something I'm very interested in.
And on the same note, what if we have a big policy issue that we want to engage
Yes.
people ongoing, right? Before we actually get to our decision-making process, is there an online opportunity
Yeah.
actually for us to be able to have that ongoing conversation ahead of time?
There's three essential functions I see. We're taking in information and requests from the public. They need help with something, they need a repair, they need to file a complaint. We need to be able to push out information to people, like Commissioner Hardesty said, whether it's road closures, weather alerts, an important item coming up at council, where is your neighborhood association's next meeting? And then that opportunity for community to work together with the city and each other is something that I would really
So
like to
Commissioner
see.
Udaley and Commissioner Hardesty, you mentioned one of the cities that's had this service for a long time. It jogged in my memory that we've talked on the team a number of times that there are advantages in being a late adopter. So
Yeah.
we're learning a lot. That's probably
Learn
the
from
only
mistakes.
advantage is learning. Two things. Yes, we are learning from a lot of jurisdictions that do use, let's say, thousands of people that have contacted the jurisdiction about X issue as a proactive measure to invite them to policy conversations or processes that are in place to improve the service. We definitely are interested in that and want to work with policymakers, the five of you principally, to figure that out. Secondly, I've talked to a number of cities, and I know the team has gone much further in depth about the question of kind of real-time and weekly analytics. There are a number of cities that actually watch trends daily, so they know before many people know, or even the
Yeah.
people themselves in a neighborhood, that something is brewing. And then you can just make decisions about being proactive through not just technology, but face-to-face or outreach, that something is happening that we need to have a conversation about. So we are keenly aware of those. We haven't decided exactly what we're going to propose on that. There are dangers to watching things daily and hourly as well, so we're trying to figure that out.
Oh, I know, I spend way too much time on social media, so.
But yes, we believe that it needs to be a tool that goes both ways, and it really needs to be useful for folks that are helping to make policy recommendations and decisions. Michelle or Josh or Sook, anything to add to that?
Yes, can I just add one more thing for future conversation? So as we just shared, the pace of innovation expectations changes very rapidly.
Yes.
Next year, we'll have different expectations because there'll be different realities and tools to support that. So I just want to make a plug for funding the pace of innovation in any of our budgeting, because if we can't just do this in spurts, and also would make a case for bureaus, because most bureaus, including Civic Life and the smaller ones, do not have technology and some of these skill sets to keep up with the innovation that the city is leading. So if we forget that we need to fund the pace of innovation on a regular basis, and if we don't bring our bureaus along, expecting not just a culture and service and accountability, but upgrading classifications and actually building the technology skill sets, that's an investment as well that we shouldn't overlook.
Suk, I don't think you get any argument, but we are in the reality that we're in, and I think everybody is absolutely committed to this system, and we will have to figure out how to piece together it as we go along. So I want to dampen expectations about an influx of new resources coming in, because that's not.
Oh, that's
gonna-
absolutely, I understand that. I just, can we leave it
I
as
know,
a
I know.
placeholder for future conversation?
You are a good director, you are doing your job, but as the commissioner, I want to also be very clear that this is not where we are at the moment, but I appreciate your plug. I want to go back to something that Commissioner Fritz said earlier, and want to tell you why I have such a problem with the word ticket, or what was the other? Case. It is really important that the Office of Equity and Human Rights is working directly with the technology team, because it's very easy for the technology side to be focused only on technology and forget about how people will see and feel and experience what's on the system. And so for me and most people of color, citation and ticket creates a whole criminal justice framework. And if I can't get my mind out of a criminal justice framework, I can't hear anything else that you say to me, right? And so I just wanted to make sure that that's on the record and people understand that words have power and words will either invite some people in or make other people self-select out. And if I saw something that started with ticket, I'm out of there, right? So just wanted to put that on the record and be very intentional about how we move forward, who's involved in making those key decisions, and what lens they're looking at those decisions through.
That, I'd just like to piggyback on that, because the one thing, I want to thank you for this presentation and all the work that's been done. We've come a long way, and I think, Josh, you were here maybe last year, and we talked quite a bit about accessibility, starting with accessible language that's written for, the average reading comprehension level of a community member on out to more kind of specific accommodations. I didn't see anything about community involvement in this process. And I realize you've been doing a lot of internal work with bureaus that kind of have to take an inventory of what their needs are, but this needs to be developed by Portlanders for Portlanders. I'm just going to say it. We've done such a terrible job at customer service. We have no business developing a new customer service model without community.
Absolutely. If I could speak to that, two pieces that very much, it's not about the technology, it's about the communication. And as we've talked about bringing services on board to this process, each time we bring the service on board, it's an opportunity to rewrite it, to match what the community member would need in order to actually partake of that service. And definitely the case that for all of these services, I think they need to go through basically what we're doing with the website. As we roll out new features to the website, we go out to locations like the Development Service Center, to some of our parks and recreation locations, and we have real humans test the product to tell us, is it working for them? And I think that's critical for these forums as well, is to go through and have usability testing with our community members.
I'm more of a mind to develop systems hand in hand with community and not bring them the final product and ask them to beta test it.
And we've been
to
at this a
fine-tune
while,
it.
so we may need a refresher on. We did do community engagement at the outset and try to
Okay.
continue.
Yeah, but
So Michelle, can you give us a little refresher and talk about your response to that as well?
Yeah, so we did do community surveying, both a representative survey and language-specific surveys. But I think more to your point, Commissioner, we are also working on ways to directly engage community members in redesigning our customer service process end to end. So as an example, with our ADA and language access requests and complaints, we are working with community members to have them help us design from the moment they might have an inkling of they have a need or a desire, all the way through, how do I make that request? How does the city help me with that? How do I hear back from the city? What do I do if it doesn't go well? So that we are really centering the user or the community member in how we design our service
Do we have any kind of
process.
community advisory body that's advising this project?
We do not currently, but that is an excellent suggestion.
And finally, I'll just say, I know that we can't start out with all the bells and whistles that I have in mind. I just want to make sure that we don't get saddled with technology that could become rapidly outdated and can't grow to accommodate those aspirations, because I promise you, I will be immediately looking for funding and resources to create that engagement type platform I'm talking about, and I'm going to be really unhappy if it's something we can't achieve, because 2 years from now, the software we've chosen is out of date. Or
You want to speak to that, Josh?
Yeah.
Our
Absolutely.
technologist.
I think we have an opportunity here that we don't often have in government technology. When we're buying government technology, it's often a very small group of people that buy that technology.
Yeah.
Very small number of users, and the technology does get out of date. It doesn't get maintained at the same level. What we're talking about purchasing here is customer service technology, and literally every business has to do this. So we get to buy solutions that a big S&P 500 company is going to use. We get to buy a solution that a new online provider of something is going to use. This is definitely not a case where we're buying an edge case, which is typically whenever government gets into trouble with technology purchases.
You can sense the past trauma that I'm bringing to this conversation, though,
Definitely.
right?
I understand it.
Okay, thank you.
I've managed those application portfolios in government before, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
So one last question about the language. I noticed that we're starting with 5, and is there a reason why those 5 as compared to, did we do some analysis and say these are the 5 top languages other than English that are spoken in Portland, or did somebody just say these 5 look cool?
So specifically on the language accommodations piece, yes, so those 4 of those are our top 5 safe harbor languages in terms of number of community members who speak them. Nepali we added to the list because they're a relatively isolated language community and may have specific needs. We are looking at designing a process that can meet both the needs of larger and smaller language communities.
I ask because where I live in East Portland, there's a large African population, and I didn't see any access for them.
That's something we can certainly follow up on. Okay, we'll move on to talk about data. So in a number of our council conversations, both commissioners and members of the public have spoken to the need not only to have better data about what community members are reporting or requesting, but also to really use that data responsibly. And so we wanted to honor that conversation, speak to it today, and give you a little bit of our thinking around how the city might better design, manage, and use data in the future to inform our service delivery decisions. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Martin with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everybody. I am Kevin Martin. I lead the Smart City PDX program out of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. We're thrilled to be here, along with our partners like Office of Equity and Human Rights, and to work with 311 and Power and the other folks at the table. So I've got some prepared remarks about data and privacy. Feel free to jump in with questions at any time. But clearly, we have a data opportunity here with 311 to build our understanding of the city's approach to customer service. I think a lot of that has been discussed today. Data collected from 311 will increase accountability and will allow the city to be more proactive, efficient, and responsive in our service delivery, and to better tailor city services to community needs. But we also recognize that no one source of information should be read as truth. We will need to combine 311 data with other sources of information and integrate the expertise and experience of staff and community members, or we risk acting on information that is not representative of all Portlanders. I think we've heard this from Commissioner Daly and Commissioner Hardesty and the mayor, that we need Portlanders' voices at the table as partners in this project. Without this more holistic view, it's possible that the most vulnerable will be made more so, and that those who already have the greatest access to city services will get more. We must be deliberate and thoughtful in our data approach and in the design of the 311 system. Smart City PDX is committed to helping the city better use, share, manage, and integrate data to increase data accessibility across bureaus, to helping staff and community understand the opportunities and risks that data bring, and to ensuring that as Portland becomes a more data-informed city, that we are using this information to improve services and outcomes for all Portlanders, with a specific focus on the needs of the most underserved, vulnerable, and marginalized. We're grateful to the 311 program for including us in this discussion from the beginning, and we look forward to integrating 311 into the data and privacy governance efforts that Smart City PDX is leading for the city, and to breaking down data silos. I also wanted to address the conversation around Community Advisory Committee that Commissioner Daly raised. It's going to be hard to have an advisory committee for every tech and data initiative that we undertake as a city. We really need to build an ongoing community relationship around data and technology. This came up a couple of weeks ago in the conversation we had around facial recognition. I think this is just another project that emphasizes that need. Next slide. The good news is we are not starting from scratch. Smart City PDX has spent a busy last few years building a foundation for better data policy and governance. The 2017 Open Data Policy Ordinance committed us to better data governance and greater transparency. The 2018 Smart City PDX Priorities Framework Resolution sets a goal and criteria for centering and upholding equity in our use of data and technology. The 2019 Privacy and Information Protection Principles Resolution established guiding principles for making us a more responsible, equitable, and trusted steward of the public's data. Again, we're excited to partner with 311 to apply this foundation to guide decisions around what data we collect, how we make 311 the data available to staff and the public, and ensuring that the data-informed choices we make are transparent, responsible, and equitable. Yeah, with that, back to Michelle, unless anybody has questions. Thank you.
I do have a comment. Data is only as valuable, is only valuable to us if it's representative of our full community, and you hit on some of those points. Complaint-based systems, which is typically what we operate with here at the city, are inherently inequitable because they are driven by who feels entitled to complain, who knows how to navigate the system, and who expects redress. So I think, again, ADA and language options, language support is valuable, but I want to make sure that we're doing real work to reach out to underserved communities and re-enfranchise people who justifiably have zero faith in this system. So that I don't expect people to be able to answer that. I'm not really asking a question. I'm just saying, like, we have to do that. How are we going to do it is a conversation that we need to have as we move forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Commissioner Daly.
So from the perspective of data, we've talked a lot about this today. We're really thinking about data as a way to not only help the 311 program monitor its own performance and make sure that the services that we're providing are actually meeting our community needs and are tailored to their preferences, but that it can also help inform bureaus and city leadership in being more responsive to community requests, identifying gaps in outreach or delivery, so those cases where either we're not serving communities or we're not hearing from communities, and then also to help discover emerging issues or evolving public needs, which Tom spoke to earlier. In terms of performance metrics, we're currently collecting data through the information and referral program on things like how many contacts are we receiving and in what format, how long does it take us to answer that call, and those are metrics that we want to improve from a customer service standpoint. But more importantly, I think we have an obligation to develop and measure ourselves against metrics that relate to how is the community represented in our program? Are we actually hearing from all Portlanders? Are we complying with our civil rights obligations? Are our community members and our employees satisfied with the services they're receiving? And those are things that we're thinking about, how do we institute as this program develops? And then I will be honest, we are in the early stages of this program. We don't have a data reporting and analytics program developed yet, which does give us the opportunity to be very intentional about how we design that program, building on the work of Smart City PDX and very intentionally examining questions like how are we designing our forms and our mechanisms for community and requests and reports? What type of information are we collecting about the issue? What type of information are we collecting about the person making that request? How are we managing that data? Is the data open and accessible to the public? how are we protecting privacy when that's appropriate? How are we sharing and reporting data both internally within our bureaus and leadership and then also outwardly to the public who is and isn't represented? And then how are we using this data to actually inform service delivery and make sure that we're leading to more equitable results, not landing in that complaint-driven system where community members who have access to services are being served first. So this is very early thinking, so I want to caveat, but the three programs that are represented here today, 311, the Power Project, and Smart City PDX, have been thinking collectively about how do we coordinate our service migration. We are talking about instituting new technology and new tools with the efforts led by BTS, about migrating services to a centralized 311 program, and about really adding a new layer of data, responsible data thinking via Smart City PDX. And that's a lot to ask of bureaus. So we're working together to think about how can we do this in a more comprehensive way, in a more holistic way, to really strategically migrate services and improve equity, accessibility, experience, transparency, and accountability at once. And then to create a replicable process that can be used over time. So working these programs as well as the city budget office and their performance management to think through how are we providing a process, can we improve or redesign our service delivery, improve the customer experience, how are we managing change within our bureaus, how are we designing and developing all of the technology that supports our service delivery, and then how do we responsibly use that data and manage our performance over time. So this is something I hope that we will be able to showcase more in the future, but this is the direction that we're headed in.
And Michelle, before we move from that slide, I want to make sure that every council member knows that I will be following up in terms of the progress that the team makes, because I am very worried that based on the comments that were made here, we've been thinking about, we don't want to be in the position 2 to 3 years out that the new site has become a landing pad for every document, every piece of information, and we have not thought through as a city yet, how do we want to govern this new system to continue to promote universal design, simplicity, access, and why are we putting things on the site? And what should be on the site?
So Tom, this gets to my earlier point, which is we need to prioritize. I mean, originally the goal of this, I mean, just boiling it down to its basic element, was we had like 275 phone lines in different bureaus, many of which were dead-end voicemails that nobody was responding to, and we said we need to consolidate and centralize our customer service function. So that's, to me, at the top of the pyramid, is the consolidation of customer service. Now we need clarity from a strategic perspective. What is the order of priorities about what the functionality is of this program? And without that, we're stuck in the water.
Agreed. And what I'm trying to point out here, and maybe only half successfully, is that these programs and initiatives, with the excellent work they've done to integrate and use the overlap and the leverage combined that they have, we still haven't figured out a couple years from now what prevents us from making the same mistakes we made 19 years ago or whenever certain platforms.
So let me
So
give
we
you
have
a
to
hint.
figure out with all the 5 of you, eventually 4 and then eventually 5, how do you want to empower us to make decisions so that we don't replicate phone lines? that
Okay,
we
so
don't-
so
that's-
this is
that's the
this is a
question I'm
helpful
asking.
conversation, and I appreciate it. My concern is we're figuring out the how before the what. This is all about technology, about data, about apps versus enterprise systems, about how we're going to integrate data, about how we're going to collect and report on data. But we still haven't had the thorough conversation, or at least I haven't seen the thorough conversation about to what end are we building this technological platform. And I'm hearing commissioners say different things, if I may be so bold as to speak for some of my fellow commissioners. I'm hearing them say, number one, we need to know what people are already using our customer our customer management, CRM, customer resource management system for. Number two, we're saying go out into the community and ask the community what they want in terms of interface with city government. And number three, you're hearing from me that not all things can be prioritized all at once. We always end up tripping over ourselves when we try to do too much all at once. Let's really be thoughtful and sequential about this. Commissioner Udaley gave a great example earlier about some of the issues in the permitting system. And under her leadership, the Permitting Bureau actually prioritized what they needed to fix in what order, and they've been really successful at it. In fact, I think their app went live on Monday, yesterday, and it was successful. Yes. There's a precedent here, and
There is, and I'm glad you mentioned the POPs project, the online permitting system, because in the conversations I've had with this excellent team, we have talked about how do we make sure that council understands that we need to shift to some system to make decisions with these three related programs, like Commissioner Udaley and the team did with POPs. We had to say, we're going to do this, and a number of bureaus are going to prioritize it, and we're going to have clear decision-making. And that's the only point I'm trying to make here, Mayor, is that we have to still have those conversations with you so that folks understand as we build out these interrelated efforts and make it easier for the community to access services, we have to figure out who makes the decisions as we go forward to prioritize this and make sure that the whole city is working together on this and that we don't have people moving in different directions.
what's
That's the
your
point I'm trying-
recommendation to us?
We're
Who
not
should that
quite
be?
there. I asked the team to do a brainstorming session on what the future state and the
Right.
governance is. And I just wanted to put the marker down that we will come back to you, and it won't be an easy discussion on how we empower some people to do this, because it will require all of you as commissioners in charge to tell people at some level,
Right.
we all have to give up a little to make sure it's easier for the community to access these things. So we want to come back to you with that. We hope we'll get some consultant report as well, but is that a fair assessment of where we're at? We just started that around what that model might look
All
like.
right, that's fair warning. I appreciate that. That's helpful.
And I'm sorry that I took more time than I planned, Michelle, on that last piece. Sorry.
No, I find that this was very helpful because I think you're right that we're now at a place where some hard choices will have to be made, right? And we're looking to your leadership to actually tell us what bureaus, no question, should be part of this system, right? As I think about commission offices, I certainly don't want to create another barrier for the public to be able to talk to me, right? So if all of a sudden my office went, well, I'm sorry, you got to call 311 if you want to talk to me, that would not make sense, right? But there are some bureaus that it makes perfect sense today to move their customer service function into that process. And I think Portland Parks and Rec would be an ideal example of that, right? Lots of moving parts, lots of phone calls. Having a one-stop shop to be able to do everything you do with parks would be great, right? There are other bureaus that, again, makes perfect sense that they would, when we launch this, they're going to be a part of it, right? And so when we come back, that's what I'm going to be looking for from you, a prioritized list. How many bureaus do we need to start with so that we actually get the outcomes that we're looking for and we have measurable information, data that we can say, okay, based on where we are now, this is what we see, and this is how we need to change it to be more adaptable for the needs of the community. So that's the conversation I'm looking forward to having because, you know, we can't do it all at one time.
That's right.
And what we do must make sense because the last thing we want to do is confuse the public more when our goal is to make it as easy as possible for them to get information. So I want to thank you all. I am still 100% committed to this project. I want to be really clear. I love where you're headed, what you're thinking, but I think the caution today is really about we have to bring our community along, we have to bring the bureaus along, and we have to have a big picture vision about where we're moving because all of us get a little shell shock when it comes to technology because we've been burned over and over again. And it's not my expertise, which is why we look to the people who have that expertise, right? Thank you. Appreciate all the info today. Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just thrilled that after 12 years, here we are having everybody saying, yes, absolutely, we need to do this. We just have to figure out how to do it. In fact, Commissioner Randy Leonard was talking about this before I got on the council. And so I particularly thank Lisa Turley and Laura Wolf in the Bureau of Emergency Communications, who did a lot of the early work, because they realized that if there were fewer calls to the non-emergency, which is answered by the emergency call takers anyway, that could make the 911 system much more efficient as well. And I also thank John Dutt, the leader of the Information and Referral Services for so many years, and Amalia Alaconda Morris, who also was very enthusiastic about doing this back in my first term. And I need to thank Charlie Hales and Commissioner Nick Fish. There were some real challenges during Mayor Hales' administration with the budget, but with Commissioner Fish's support, we were able to keep the 311 concept kind of limping along. And then in comes Mayor Ted Wheeler and Tom Reinhardt, who have, really embraced it and have taken it, just amazing levels. Thanks in part to Sukri and also especially Michelle Koenig-North, who has had some of the most gnarly project managements that I think any city staff person has had in the time I've been here, and she just does an absolutely amazing job. So I want to be very clear that I expect the Water Bureau to be involved in these discussions, and in that we have to figure out the challenge of water and sewer bills being paid, the staff there being paid for by ratepayer dollars. But there isn't a problem with general fund dollars being used for the 311 system, being allowed to take payments. It's not just the walk-in business that we get at the Water Bureau. It's people wanting to make payments over the phone. It's also people wanting to ask questions, and absolutely, they should be able to call 311 and then get referred on to the staff in the Water Bureau, just like any challenging policy question would be referred on to a commissioner's office. So I appreciate all of the briefings that Tom Reinhardt has had with me, and I will continue to advocate for getting the Water Bureau integrated to the extent possible. Finally, thanks so much to Tim Quayle, my Chief of Staff, and Claire Adamsick, my Senior Policy Director, who have been involved in this for 5+ years, or 12 in Tim's case, because it really is something that is going to be a lasting improvement that we can all be very, very proud of. Thank you very much, everybody, for your work.
Well, thank you all. This has been a great conversation. And it's always great to get a history lesson on the last 20 years of whatever issue we're talking about. But the one piece missing from that history lesson is it was my office that reignited this conversation and that was ready to lead through my bureau civic life. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to keep working on it. And once again, I want to recognize that we won't be doing everything at once. That first piece of just improving our customer service is essential. I just want to guarantee that as we move forward, figure out those kinks, get that up and running, that there's infinite capacity for us to do more with it, because it's just, I think it's going to be a transformational tool. Thank you.
And last but not least, I want to thank Commissioner Udaly, and I want to thank Director Reed and the Office of Community and Civic Life for your leadership on this. I think it's fantastic. This has been a really good work session. This has been a good discussion. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground. Tom, I think you guys have done a really good job of laying before us what some of the decision points are going to be going forward. And I'm really excited. The vision that you laid out right at the beginning is a vision I strongly support. It's a great vision, and we absolutely will press forward on this. And I appreciate everybody's super hard work on that. So unless there's anything for the good of the order, we are adjourned.